Okay, Gold Rush Girl. We left off at a super suspenseful spot, so let's find out what's happened. I'm so nervous about Jacob now. Chapter 24. Jacob kidnapped, crimped, stolen away. To say that I was shocked is too mild. I might as well use other words such as dumbstruck, appalled, and finally helpless. Never had I been so frightened, except the bigger truth was I did not know what to do. Numb. Some part of me did not even want to believe that's what Sam had suggested. It was too horrific. Or maybe he was just trying to get me to go away, scare me off. Next moment, I realized how much he had helped me. After all, he had been told not to speak to me by his father about Mr. Castle. But although Sam didn't owe me or Jacob anything, he had told me a great deal, a real risk. I was touched and grateful. There was something else. If I didn't want to believe it, the only way to prove Sam was wrong was to find Jacob or have Jacob show up on his own. Otherwise, I had to believe Sam, didn't I? But if what Sam said was true, I must find Jacob and fast, or he'd disappear forever. Wobbly, struggling for breath, trying desperately to think what I could do. I could not say which hurt me more, my head, my stomach, or my heart. Somehow, I made my way back into town. Once there, I went to Montgomery Street and stood on the edge of the cove. From that vantage point, I gazed out at the forsaken ships, which is to say, Rotten Row. The truth is, I had not spent much time thinking about the ships. Yes, they were there when our ship landed, and I had been curious about them, noticing that their numbers had much increased since we arrived. There were maybe hundreds now, but as far as I'd been concerned, they were simply part of the madness that was San Francisco. Yes, odd, truly strange, but not for a moment did I consider that they might have anything to do with me or Jacob. But as I stood on the beach that moment and observed the empty ships, I saw the bulky, rotting hulks with altogether different eyes. It may seem fantastical, but crowded together as they were, some wedged so tightly I could have walked from one to the other, they seemed alive, distressingly alive. Since the cove waters rippled some, the unoccupied ships shifted slightly, chasing and bumping one against another, making squeaking, grinding, and rasping sounds that reached the beach. It was almost as if the entire desolate fleet were some kind of wounded beast, masts, spars, and yards poking out in a million different ways. A brisk fiend scathe or a gigantic multi-horned and spiked but dying monster. The idea that Jacob had hidden away on one of those many ships, swallowed like Jonah was swallowed in the whale, was beyond horrifying. Because if it was true, how might I ever be able to find him? Never in my life had I been so unnerved. I was absolutely sick. With my insides feeling like they were stuffed with stones, I stood there more dead than alive. The more I stood there trying to make up my mind and control my feelings, the more I felt it was my fault that Jacob was gone. Knowing he had been unhappy, I should never, as Senor Gonzalez had gently hinted, left him behind when I had gone down to the bay that day with Dad. Let it be admitted, just the day before, I had pictured myself a grand, independent adult. It had been wonderful to think I was free and liberated. Now I rued the moment. In truth, I grossly neglected my responsibilities. I had been arrogant. Do you wish to feel young? If so, be humiliated. And what if Mother or Father returned and I could not tell them where Jacob was? That thought made me nauseous. I must find Jacob. Yet how? I had no idea. Beyond all else, I felt terribly alone. Next moment, I was overcome by an urgent need to speak to someone, as if to get away from my own frights. Yet understand, in San Francisco, other than in Happy Valley, there was no such thing as a neighbor. It was not like Providence, where I knew everyone who lived on Sheldon Street as they knew me. Yes, the tents near us were occupied, but the young men who lived in them came and went like so many wispy clouds in the sky. As for women, there were so few, and if they were not at saloons, they ran boarding houses or helped with their husbands' businesses. I knew none. There was Senor Rosales, but he was overworked with his cafe. Who was I to turn to? As you might have guessed it, it was Thad. I ran to the store where he worked and found him quick enough. He was clerking behind one of the counters, offering shovels and picks to a boisterous line of new arrivals. As soon as he saw me, he called out, "Find him?" Too agitated to talk, I merely shook my head. He must have sensed that I was troubled because he said, "What happened?" I wasn't going to repeat aloud what Sam told me, so I only said, "Come to my tent as soon as you can." "Will do," he said. I turned and fairly fled from the store, pushing my way through crowds of miners who jeered and rebuked me for my belligerence. I did not care. I ran back uphill to our tent as fast as possible, forced my way through the usual mobs. As I went, I kept repeating the same prayer in my head. Be there, be there. Oh dear God, please let Jacob be there. I reached the tent and fairly well leaped inside. Jacob was not there. Whatever strength remained in me shrank to nothing, dissolved. I flung myself onto Jacob's bed and burst into tears. I beg you to understand, crying was something I loathed to do. But at that moment, I could not help myself. I sobbed. My whole body trembled. My chest hurt. I could barely breathe. "What am I going to do?" I wailed out loud. "What am I going to do?" I found Mother's shawl and wrapped it around me. Oh, how I missed her. From across the way, I heard Senor Rosales call out, "Cordurita, did you find him?" He must have seen me rush into the tent. Perhaps he heard my cries. I sat up, worked to suppress my gulps of grief, and pawed at my wet face. "Cordita," he called again. "What is it? What is the matter?" The next moment, Senor Rosales did something he had never done before. He stuck his head right inside our tent. "Que paso? What did you learn about Jacob? What has happened?" I looked up at him. My unhappy face must have revealed my ghastly feelings and frightened thoughts because he came in all the way. More, he squatted down before me and put out a kind hand, which I clutched eagerly with both of mine, even as I wetted it with tears. His gaze was full of sympathy. "Cordurita, por favor, you must tell me. What has happened?" Halting now and again, snuffling, struggling to keep from crumbling anew into sobs and tears, I told Senor Rosales all that Sam had told me and what I feared had happened to Jacob. His face showed alarm and anger. "Santo Dios," he muttered and made the sign of the cross over his chest. "More than once, I have heard rumors of such terrible things," he said. "But Jacob, un niño, I warned your father. This place, there are wolves here. Did you truly think that is what has happened to him?" Tears flowed down my cheek. "I don't know," I wailed. I just have to find him. I just have to." It was hard for me to even talk or breathe. "Very well. On the square, the police chief, Senor Malachi Fallon, has the office in the old schoolhouse. There are police officers there. Someone will help." Do you think so?" "Cordurita, Senor Fallon is la policia. He must find Jacob. It is his obligation. Come, I go with you." "Will you?" I said, deeply grateful for his help. "Cordurita, I've told you many times, I think of you as my daughter, Jacob my son. My daughter isn't here, as I told your esteemed padre, because this city is not safe for young people. Forgive me. Is leaving you was a mistake. This proves me right. But since you are my local daughter, well then, I will help." I jumped up and hugged him. He hugged me back. "Vamos," he said. "We must find Senor Fallon. As that boy Sam told you, if all of this is true, we must act rapidamente. Rapidamente." "Senor," I said. "Senor, one thing. You cannot say anything about Sam." "Why?" He's worried that he'll be blamed." "Fine, whatever you say. Now, hurry. We must hurry." Chapter 25. We squished through the mud to Portsmouth Square, going right to the old schoolhouse, a small single-story wooden building. When we reached it, I stood next to Senor Rosales at the front door, trying to catch my breath and unclutter my thoughts. "What do you wish me to do?" he asked. "I can talk to whoever is here, but perhaps it is better you talk. Jacob is your hermano." It may seem stupid to say, or even simple, but I was learning that being frightened while deciding to decide the right thing to do is very difficult. I struggled hard to control my distress. "I'll talk," I said, and forced myself to stand up and wiped the tears from my face. I'm ready," I said, though I didn't think I was. "Bueno, think for a moment." I took a deep breath, then I nodded. Senor Rosales pushed the door open. It was a large room divided in half, front and back, with a door in the back part. Next to the door was a bench with a man sitting on it. He was bent over reading the Alta California, the newspaper for which Thad's father worked. When we came in, this man looked up. His weather-beaten face bore a large and crooked nose, as if it had been broken some while ago. The skin about his small eyes was puffy, his mouth set in a frown. His chin was neither smooth nor bearded, while his thick hair was much disheveled. A large pistol was stuck in his belt. In short, there was something altogether disagreeable about this man. Senor Rosales spoke first. "Senor, con respecto, where is the chief of police?" The man looked at me and then at Senor Rosales. He appeared to be one of those people who take their time to speak, not because he is thinking, but to show you he's in charge. When he did respond, he nodded toward the door, saying, "Don't know if he's in there." "Why?" I said. "He don't answer to me." With that, the man shook out the paper as if it contained crumbs that needed disposing of. Then he made a demonstration of resuming his reading. Ignoring him, I went forward and knocked on the door. No one answered. I looked at Senor Rosales. He pursed his lips. I looked at the man with the newspaper. Though he kept his eyes fixed on the paper, I was sure he was not reading, but waiting to see what I did. Agitated, desperate to do something, I twisted the doorknob on the big door and pushed it open. There was a big oaken chest in the middle of the smaller room, plus a few large chairs. On the wall hung a picture of James Polk, the former president of the United States, the one whose words had brought my father and thousands of others to California. A man behind the desk was leaning forward. His head was resting in his arms. Judging by his heavy, steady breathing, he was asleep. I shoved the door farther in, went forward, and stood before his desk. "Sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't move. I looked at Senor Rosales. He shrugged. "Captain Fallon," I called louder. When he didn't stir, I leaned over the desk. "Captain Fallon, hello? Sir, hello?" Very slowly, the man sat up, revealing a square, fleshy face with bags under small, sleepy eyes. His mouth was thin-lipped, and he had a high, receding hairline, topped with only thin, curly hair. He looked first at Senor Rosales and then at me, as if struggling to gasp that we were even there. "Sir," I said, "I need help." "Well now," he muttered, rubbing his face, "what kind of help would you be asking for?" "Please, sir," I said again, "are you Captain Fallon, the chief police?" "It's what I'm called." "Please, I really need your help." "Do you?" He took a deep breath, and then his eyes considered me with much sympathy, as if I were a stray dog. I said, "I think my brother has been kidnapped." Captain Fallon barely reacted. He simply clasped his large hands before him and continued to sit there, as if not interested or perhaps not understanding. "And who is your brother?" "Jacob Blaisdell. Young, old, 10. "Ah," he said. And then he actually yawned. "Just a lad. Who are you and what's your age?" "I'm Victoria Blaisdell. I'm 14. "A girl?" The way he said it was dismissive. "This man," he nodded to Senor Rosales. "Who's he?" "A friend. He's helping me. My father is at the diggings." Where's your ma? She'll be here any day now. She's coming from back east. You're alone then? Yes, sir. Captain Fallon studied his hands, then sighed as if he was bored. Have you, he said without even looking up, any idea how many people every day go missing from this city? No, sir. And 99 out of 100 have only taken themselves off to the gold fields. Jacob wouldn't do that, sir. The man's sleepy eyes lifted and studied me for a while. All right, then, he said, as if obliged. Tell me about your brother. As I repeated what Sam had told me, Mr. Fallon's face squirmed up into a scowl. Who told you that? A boy. What boy? A Negro boy who plays the bugle at the Mercury, I blurted out. He lives in Happy Valley. Colored boy, you say? At the Mercury? What makes you so sure he's telling you the truth? Because I trust him and my brother is gone. Next moment, I realized what I had done, exactly what Sam had asked me not to do, reveal him as the source of my information. Captain Fallon frowned. How long has your brother been missing? A day. 1 day? He passed a hand over his face as if he was wiping away sleep. Look here, listen to me. This brother of yours, he most likely went off to have a bit of fun. It's what boys do. You needn't worry none. If I were you, I'd go about your business. He'll come back soon. But sir, you said your father's at the diggings. Have you considered that your brother went looking for him? I don't think. What is your name again? Victoria Blaisdell. He considered me with cloudy eyes. Well, now, I'll tell you what, Miss Victoria. If your brother don't come back in a few days, you come back and let me know. But for now, no more. With that, Captain Fallon lowered his head back into his arms, and in seconds, I heard his heavy, steady breathing. He was not just telling us to go. He had actually gone back to sleep, or he was pretending to. Furious, I walked out of the office. As we came out, the man on the bench glanced up at me from his newspaper. The door to Chief Fallon's office having remained open, I wondered if this man had overheard my conversation. Not that he said anything to me, or I to him. He returned to his newspaper as if what he had been reading was more interesting than me. The moment Senor Rosales and I were out of the building, I cried, Jacob did not go off for fun, and he didn't go to the diggings, not without telling me. I don't think so either, Senor Rosales replied. As we started back toward the tent, he kept one hand on my shoulder as if to steady me. We had to work our way through crowds. After a while, I said, I have to search those ships. He halted. What ships? Rotten Row. The abandoned ones? Yes. He looked downhill toward the cove. Corderita, there are many, many hundreds. That isn't smart. I don't call you Cordita, little lamb, for nothing. Lobos, wolves. Don't forget the wolves. But what else can I do? I cried, struggling to keep my tears back. Ashamed, I turned away. For a moment, I thought I saw the man, the one in the police office. Was he following us? I trusted nothing. At that moment, Senor Rosales touched my shoulder. I swung around to face him. Maybe Jacob will come back on his own. After all, you broke your oar when you went down to the bay, but you still managed to return. Jacob doesn't do things like that. He's timid. And I told you what Sam said about that man. And I told that man that Sam's the one who told me. And I promised Sam I wouldn't. I'm not sure, Cordrita. The police chief listened to anything you said. I looked back to see if that man was behind us. If it had been him, he was no longer there. I decided I was just inventing more problems. Increasingly unnerved, I started walking again. I did not speak. It was raining. Senor Rosales said, Muy bien, search, but you can't search those empty ships alone. It's not safe, and in the rain. I have to. I'm the adulto here. I go with you. You can't leave your cafe. You don't have doors. Have faith, Corderita. People will not steal. Besides, Jacob, you and Jacob are más importantes. Gracias, I said, feeling it deeply, but I had no patience to listen. What I wanted to do was immediately go to those empty ships. Yes, there were hundreds, but I was convinced Jacob was on one of them. We walked the rest of the way back in silence. The rain stopped and started again. Not that I cared. You must find Jacob. That was the only thought that repeated itself over and over again in my head. You must. Wow. Poor Tori. Poor Jacob. All right, I'm going to stop there.